But I do have to say I'm honored to be with you guys.
Oh, we're now live.
Oh.
Stop laughing now. Sorry to all my fellow Antarctic guides. I was just chatting with Mark, Hannah and Kyle. Good evening. My name is Gerard Baker and I've been working in polar regions now for all of my life, basically. I'd just like to explain a little bit about what's going to happen tonight. We have a panel of esteemed polar guides, Hannah, Mark and Kyle, and you'll have the chance to approach us with questions that you have. I'd just like to thank, first of all, Lauren, who's behind the scenes now, moderating your questions, and Graham for letting us do this. Earlier in the year, I'd approached PTGA and asked if we could have a panel that discussed LGBTQ A to Z. Sorry, I'm flapping my hands, but I can never remember how that goes. Partly because I'd been assaulted on a ship and that led to a number of issues. And I thought it was something that maybe as a group of guides we could address. So I'd like to thank PTGA for that. But also within this year, we have a fallow year of guiding. None of us are where we would like to be, I think. It's up to really you as a group of guides to bring your issues and the subjects you'd like to discuss to PTGA. It's not just for them to direct their topics to you. So please do get in touch with them. Having said that, I won't chat too much. I'd like to introduce, first of all, Hannah, ladies first, to introduce herself, and then Kyle and Mark, and then we'll start with our questions. Hannah.
Right. I never think of myself as a lady. That's quite scary already. I think many of you probably know me. I've been working now in expedition guiding since 1999. And weirdly, I actually got into guiding because of lesbian networking. I was in London doing a master's, just finishing a master's, and I met somebody socially, a women's group who worked for Noble Caledonia. And we joined this sort of group of women, and she just said I was like the sort of people she employed, and we became friends. And yeah, and she sent me an email saying, do you want to do a trip around the Scottish Islands? So I started out on a small ship doing a trip in Scotland, and from that I then the following year learned to drive Zodiacs and spent a whole summer. That was in the year 2000, and since then I've been working on small ships. So yeah, it was my sexuality that gave me the job, but I actually think now it's actually probably the least interesting thing about me. Is the fact that I'm gay. I am married. I have a wife, but I've my main thing is the marine mammals, the birds' life, interacting with passengers, being an expedition leader, and I've been extremely lucky in my career.
And Kyle, how about you? Tell us about you.
I'm a commercial photographer based in Canada, and I started working for a travel company that invited me up to the Arctic in, like 2006, I think. And ever since then, I was totally hooked. Everyone was telling me about the Antarctic, and I was just like, I have to go there. And it was one of the first times out on expedition teaching photography where I felt like, oh gosh, this is me. This is where I belong. Ever since then, I've been supplementing my commercial photography with guiding, because the teaching photography is so different from actually doing it, and it's much more social. You get to actually use your skills to improve people's self-esteem and their own skills, and that's what keeps bringing me back to doing this. I mean, we've been there a million times, and I don't really need to go back, but I keep wanting to because of that type of environment where I get to make people a little bit more skilled, a little bit better.
Kyle, you'll definitely need to go back. That's what we all experience.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mark, how about yourself?
Well, I went on my first polar trip. I did an independent expedition to Alaska. I just heard the calling of the ice and I went to Point Barrow. for the first time in 2006. During that time, however, I was founder of an LGBT wine event and travel company called Out in the Vineyard, a rural company in Napa, California. You know, living here and working in the wine industry, I was working for a large Australian wine company, and I kept saying to the marketing team, why is no one marketing to the LGBT community? We drink a lot, we're wine collectors, and they just didn't get it. Subsequently, though, in 2011, I took my first Antarctica trip to the peninsula, but similar questions arose. For me to find that expedition I wanted to go on, there was absolutely no marketing. Nobody I knew in the LGBT community had gone, and it was a mystery. So I ended up going, though, of course, and like Kyle and probably all of us caught polar fever very badly, and ended up going back over and over again as a travel writer and photographer. And I pinned my first piece toward the gay community called Antarctica, the Ultimate White Party, for a international LGBT travel magazine called Man About World. That spun into, the more I was there, the more I knew I needed a guide. And so in between those periods of writing, I got my STCW, went to the US Maritime Academy in San Francisco Bay, and then ended up full-time work in 2017 at McMurdo, and also doing a Ross Sea trip for Oceanwide. And I've been a full-time guide since then in both polar regions.
Okay, well, let's start off with some discussion about how things have changed in the time that we've guided. And I think, Hannah, probably I'll ask you to start off this. You've been guiding for a number of years now, probably a lot more than the rest of us. How have things changed for you? What changes have you seen within your guiding career?
I think just like the whole of the world is that things have become more open, and maybe as I've matured as well, I've become more relaxed about my sexuality, and now I'm completely out. If any passengers ask me, if my wife is traveling with me, I'll introduce her as if like straight people would, and so from that side it kind of feels like it's become easier. But I don't know whether that's I've become more relaxed or just in the media now, there's so many more, gay people on television, and just generally, and the laws have changed. There is marriage in so many parts of the world, and so from that point of view, I think it has become, easier. There's different nationalities travel now, and with certain nationalities, it doesn't come up, about, So and I probably wouldn't necessarily, in front of a load of Chinese people, perhaps talk about being gay, because I'm not really sure what the culture is there. But I've shared cabins with my Chinese guide colleagues and had no issues at all. But for me personally, I feel like I've become either more confident and have felt like that the world has changed a bit, that it's much easier to be open.
That's a really interesting answer. Mark, from your point of view, I'd like to ask you, when you join a ship, I mean, how do you approach your guiding team? Do you come out to your cabin mate? Do you come out to the guys, or have you been outed by people you've worked with?
Yeah, I travel a lot when I'm not working. I call it the travel closet. So depending on where I am or what I'm doing, and especially when I join this industry, and with each expedition, I don't like to do it, but I do take one step into the closet as I come on board, because I don't know what the crew's going to think. I haven't met the expedition leader necessarily yet. I don't know if I'm having some Ukrainian, engineers down below who aren't friendly. So I do sort of take a step back in, and I don't say, "Hi, my name's Mark, I'm gay," and with my roommates, I don't talk about it initially. My approach is, to Hannah's point, it's not the most interesting thing about me. So like straight relationships, I just let people get to know me. And if they ask me a direct question about who's your girlfriend, or do you have a wife? My answer is, yeah, his name's John. Or, and not in a mean way, but oftentimes as I think about, the closest roommates I've had, at some point they figure it out, and I haven't had to make a big coming out party. That said, this season, I did have a pretty awkward experience where some fellow guides thought it would be amusing who knew I was gay. There was a woman guest on the trip who wanted to do some camping, and I'm probably was the most experienced ice camping guide on the ship when we were doing a Ross Sea trip. And when she asked to do it, they told her I was the most experienced guy to sleep with. And it ended up becoming a really big issue, a very uncomfortable one with me, where I really did have to come out. And because the staff started giving me some grief about it and elbowing me, and I finally had to put my foot down instead of just dance around and say, guys, of all the men on this ship, I'm the least experienced to sleep with her. And it ended up literally going all the way up to the captain, who I've worked with for several years, thank God. And he knew, and he said, not on my ship, Mark. But it was difficult to have that with my peers and to make jokes about it and think it was funny to put me in an uncomfortable position to have to bet a woman is really what the innuendo was. So,
and Kyle, I mean, your experience, I'd just like to ask Kyle about his experience on ships, because we're going around the houses a little bit with this. But before we get to questions from our audience, Kyle, what has been your experience? Have you found it easy to join the industry? Have you found it challenging to get jobs within the industry, whether you're out or not?
It was a little bit challenging, more to maintain it in a certain way, as people got to know me. And I do mirror that what a lot of what Hannah said, how it's like in conversation, it's very easy to come out. Someone asks who your partner is, or if you're married, that gives you an opportunity. Whereas with the expedition company, you never put on your resume that you're gay. You just let it happen as people know you, as your fellow staff members ask, what are your relationships like, or what's your family, what's your life like at home? That's when I say, I have a boyfriend, we've been together for 6 years, and that usually goes pretty well. But after a while, sometimes feedback comes that you never hear about until a long time later, that people were uncomfortable that I was gay, or seemed gay, or sounded gay. And the company, trying to protect its image, adopts that attitude that some passengers might have, in order to, they want to have the passengers love the company and be like the people. But if their passengers don't like gays, the company will take that stance, whether they know they're doing it or not. It was more, I feel, in the early days, it was actually better in a way. When someone said you're a faggot, you're gay, you're a girl, you're a she, it was really clear that there was some discrimination. Whereas now people are much more aware that that's not a good way to be, that people will react negatively towards that. So instead, they find other ways to pick on you. They'll pick on you as a person, or just complain about every little thing that you do, even though you're probably just about the same as every other staff member there. So it's been.
Sorry, the question I just like to ask as a secretary to that is that, do you feel that any of you feel that you couldn't be open and out with your crew, fellow guides, officers, guests? Of course, we get and lose guests every week, but I mean, not intentionally, but we churn over guests. But actually, we often on board vessels for a month, 2, 3, 4, 5 months at a time. And have you ever felt that you would be at risk by being out on the vessels you've been on? Hannah, I'll go to you first.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Personally not, but I think it is, as a woman, I think it is easier as well. I think that, I think there isn't, I think men with gay women, it's either, I have had it sometimes like jokey, kind of like, oh, your girlfriend's coming on, maybe all three of us could share a bed. I had an expedition leader, offer that, a male expedition leader, when he knew my girlfriend was coming, and I was a bit like, no, I'm actually gay and men don't come into it. But and that was sort of, but I've never, I think that men, as I say, they either want to sleep with, or they sort of find the idea of two women together interesting, but they don't find it threatening to their sort of masculinity, or they're not kind of sort of, it's not. I've found sexism much more of an issue in general misogyny, but that, that's just being a woman in the industry, where I've had captains who've just been, I've had a lot of mansplaining. I still get that quite regularly, but I've never. I think I've either been very lucky, but it's not been a huge issue for me, actually. But I think some of that is that, as a gay woman, I think it is different to being a gay man, unfortunately.
How about yourself, Mark?
I do worry about it sometimes, especially on this trip, because it was a circumnavigation. We were at sea 64 days, and being outed sort of in the way I was. Some of the Filipino sailors started jabbing me a little bit, and it made me start to worry about being below decks with some of the Ukrainians. I'm not so worried about the Filipinos. Frankly, I'm bigger than they are, but not necessarily with the Ukrainians. And some of the engineers were pretty gruff. So I did spend several weeks sort of looking over my shoulder, worrying that a wrench was going to come down in the back of my head, which may or may not be real. And I didn't experience that. But, we're out in the middle of the Amundsen Sea. And if somebody has an issue, it'd take that long for me to disappear. And that might be a function of coming out or being out in America or wherever, or just my own phobias, but that was a real concern. And yeah, one of the things that also happened with that was I have had a couple officers, we became good friends later, or even as friends, if I got close to another guide who I know is straight and we're having a little bromance, or even one of the passengers, sometimes there's some snide jokes. I had one of the guides say to me when I came upstairs, "Oh, where's your boyfriend?" Who was we'd become friends, who was a guest. And then he made a little comment of saying, "Oh, is his backside sore?" At the bar in front of a whole bunch of guests. And literally it was like a movie. Half the bar, like the record stopped and everybody looked at me. And yeah, that does happen sometimes. And that's unfortunate and awful. But again, I'm bigger than most of them. So ultimately at the end of the day, but it shouldn't have to be there, because I think it makes the guests uncomfortable. I think it makes us uncomfortable. And I think it's bad practice and a bad thing for the guests to see in terms of company behavior and management.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. I mean, I trying to think over the past few days back to my experiences on the ship, and going back into my wintering time with British Antarctic Survey. I've never really been conscious about being scared or feeling that it wasn't okay to talk about being gay to the people I was either sharing cabin with, in time, or just maybe assumed that the rest of the crew, the staff rather, just accepted it. But I've been very fortunate in that sense, apart from recently. But Kyle, how about you? I mean, just reflecting on your experiences on your time as a guide.
I like what Mark said earlier about his travel closet. It's definitely, with answer to your question, I do modify my behavior. I'm very aware of nationalities of some of the crew that were on the ship. You look at our travel advisories and it says, people like me should absolutely never go to Jamaica, and be careful about what you're wearing and who you're traveling with when you're in Africa and a lot of other countries. so I definitely go into the closet. Like when I go to Africa, I'm definitely not entirely myself. But on the ship with the crew, I there is that level of distance because I don't know. I see that a lot of crew might be from Jamaica or from some of those countries, and I'm purposely not as social with the crew. Like going down below decks is not something that I tend to want to do as often. I'm quite comfortable with a lot of my Western colleagues. But at the same time, there's also the surprise moments. There's staff that maybe been raised Catholic or something like that, and were taught that gays are bad, and they said that they previously judged me and thought people like me, wouldn't be able to do anything like this. But at the end of the expedition, they came up to me and they said, "Just so you know, you totally changed my whole perspective. I had no idea that people like you they're just like me, and I would trust you with my life, and you really opened this whole world up to me." And I was just like, God, I didn't even know. Didn't even know this guy thought I was the sketchiest person in the world, and then came to tell me that he trusted me.
Yeah. You're a revelation, Kyle. But I can see the faces of Hannah and Mark at your comment that actually that really gay people can do this. We can drive a Zodiac, jump into freezing water to rescue someone. It's like, is it possible that you can do that? And I mean, Hannah, how do you feel about that? Do you feel that people belittle you or just underestimate your capacity, not because you're a woman, but because you're a gay woman?
Definitely no. I would say not, because I'm a gay woman. I think people underestimate me, and I think that because of the way that I look, I'm podgy, I'm fat, I'm a middle-aged English woman, and I think that I work quite a lot with guide teams in Svalbard with the Swedes, and I'll often have a younger colleague who's kind of a Swedish god kind of person, either male or female, very tall and lithe and fit.
We love those, by the way.
Yeah, they amazing people that I work with, amazing colleagues that I work, and I think that sometimes the guests are a little bit like, oh, who's she? She doesn't look quite like what I was expecting of a guide. But I think it's my grey hair and my podginess. And then they see me pushing a Zodiac off, and they see me getting my rifle out and going over the tundra, and then I start talking to them about the wildlife, and they suddenly like, oh, she does sort of know what she's doing. I think she's, yeah. So I think I'm underestimated, or kind of slightly seen as being a bit of a. I also have every time I do an expedition as expedition leader, I try to have gravitas, and I begin thinking, okay, this time I'm going to be that expedition leader with gravitas, and almost immediately at the first meeting, I crack a joke, or I suddenly realise that no, once again I've failed completely. Gravitas has gone out the window. I'm once again the comedy, expedition leader, but yeah. So I think it's more that, really.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, I had some questions this week, but some Facebook comments about why aren't we having a panel about women guides? Why aren't we having inclusion panels about other nationalities, other races? And that can and will come with PTGA. I'm sure it will do. But I think it's fascinating what you say is that, you stand up there as a guide, and certainly I think Mark and Kyle and myself, we work with groups of teams that are 50-50 men and women now, pretty much. I work with actually probably more female expedition leaders than I work with male expedition leaders, pretty much. And it doesn't occur to me to think that they aren't as strong mentally and physically as everybody else. But one question we had, actually, I'm just looking, sorry, just have to excuse me, I'm looking. A question we had from our audience, and hello to everyone, particularly guides I know and work with, but we had a question: is there anything we can do as an industry to get better at developing the relationships, either within the team or within of the staff, or within the crew and guests? can we better promote ourselves, introduce ourselves, or should we just carry on being half in the closet? Mark, how about you take this?
Yeah, thanks. I was actually going to raise my hand and say, hey, let me do this. I mean, I've done within the wine industry with my company out in the vineyard. Yeah, I think a start was, us starting the Gay Expedition Guides Facebook group. That creates a little bit of awareness and a little bit of, for a lack of a better term, sort of the velvet mafia, right? We become a community, and I was surprised though initially how little engagement there was. And a few other LGBT guides I've met, there's almost a sense that they don't need to be identified as gay, or that's not important. But I think it is important for us to have a community because we can have conversations like this. So what we've done recently is expanded that from just guides to bridge crew, right? And other people on board. And that's one way to do it. And I think it's also through things like this, by an industry leader like Polar Tourism Guides Association, we're having this conversation. We haven't had this conversation before in the industry that I'm aware of, and that's huge. Another way to do it, at least for me, to sort of dovetail off Kyle's point about, when people find out, they're like, oh my God, you changed my whole impression, is for me, people find out mostly after when they see my Instagram account, because I will post things like raising the flag over Terra Nova Bay, or, raising it over McMurdo, over Bird's Head on the statue, or making some comment like, have I ever mentioned my fellow expedition guides and one of us hot guys or something? And I think it's just having the conversations, but also not making the assumption based on appearance what someone's proclivity might be. Because like I said, I've had a lot of cases where fellow guides have nudged me toward guests, or nudged me towards other guides, or nudged me towards things that are much more heteronormative than anything I'm interested in. And I think it's just having those conversations.
Kyle, I wanted to ask you a question, actually. Do you think that the PTGA, this is a question from Alejandro. Hi, Alejandro, down in Ushuaia, a good friend of mine. He's asking the question, do you think that PTGA should offer team training in understanding these issues? And or social skills in general? Should we be, educated in how we behave in front of passengers, whatever our, background or sexuality or nationality?
I think something like that couldn't hurt. Like in particular, sometimes people think they don't know how to talk about it. They might have a question about it, and they think that merely, it's funny. It's like we do want to be treated like normal people, but at the same time,
well, we are normal people.
We are normal people. But at the same time, the fact that, like, yeah, I'm gay, but that doesn't really change anything else. But talking about it is okay, and sometimes people will dance around the issue. If PTGA did have a way, I guess some training that just let people know it's okay to even talk about it. If someone said, some people might have noticed that there's a gay passenger that might want to be around a gay guide. Maybe I didn't notice that person, but that guide might be like, well, I'm too afraid to approach Kyle about a gay issue because he just wants to be treated like a normal person. At least like being candid, just tell me what you think is better than hiding it all. Recently there was I did a gay group in the Antarctic. They were coming to the company, and the group asked if there would be some gay guides. And the company I was working with said, no, we're not going to talk to our gay guides and make sure there's gay guides on there. But I knew that this was happening, and so I approached the company and I said, hey, I would like to, bring some representation to this trip. I would like to be with that gay group. So only once I brought it up, it was suddenly an okay issue. But like them coming to me talking about, you know, hey, you're gay, you might be a good fit with the gay group, was seen as taboo. So perhaps some discussion around that could be useful.
There was a question we've just had from Lizzie, and I'm going to address this to Hannah. Do you feel that there's an avenue for reporting these issues to your employers to be dealt with, or do you feel it's too risky and might backfire to you somehow? I mean, you know, if for example, Hannah, if you were assaulted verbally or physically because of your sexuality, do you feel that that's something that your company would back you up with, or that you would actually, by reporting that, be discriminated against?
All the companies I've worked with, they would be completely behind, you know, I would have no issues at all. And as I said, for me personally, it's not been an issue really. And any issues I have had with, you know, with some of the misogynistic stuff and some of the, you know, I will take it and say, hey, you know, this is going on with the captain, or but I think that most companies, I would be very, very surprised if there's companies out there, or the companies that I've worked for. You know, I work for 3 companies now. I work for Noble Caledonia, Polar Quest, and Polar Latitudes, and they're all very supportive. And you know, they would be, you know, and but any issues at all, I would be, you know, if I wasn't the expedition leader, I would take any issues that I have to the expedition leader, and then if I didn't feel, I would always go above and go to the, you know, the staffing manager, or even go to the head of the company. You know, I think that people, I think guides generally should always know who it is that they can contact with any problems they've got, you know, whatever it's about. If they're feeling that they're being, you know, harassed, or they feel that they've, you know, got issues. You know, I have had issues on the ship with guests and other guides. And you know, we did a full lesbian cruise, and in fact, on that we had, you know, a straight woman guide who was actually, you know, sort of slightly, you know, there was some inappropriate behavior from some of the guests to the straight women guides, and we had to address it. We had to like go to the passengers and say, look, this is not okay, which was slightly weird, but you know, but yeah, I think that guides generally should always know that they can always take things on. And I would not work with a company that I felt wasn't going to support me.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, do you think there are ways that we can actually, as individual guides, I feel we're often quite vulnerable. You know, we're self-employed, we're contractors. We're desperate to go back to polar regions that we love. I mean, not desperate in the same sense that, you know, we can't do anything else, but we're passionate about where we work. Yeah. And I mean, do you feel that leaves us vulnerable? And that by being open and honest to our companies, they might say, oh, well, we don't want someone that's going to be a problem to our guests, be it whatever nationality they are. And that might leave you less employable.
I think there's always that risk, right? It's like Kyle mentioned, you don't put it on your resume. But what I found also is, by bringing up the issue, I mean, I talked to Polar Latitudes a lot. You know, John is great. Charles at Ocean Light is the one who brought me on, and he knew. I made it very clear from my writings and sort of perspectives, and to Kyle's point of some companies, or his company was worried about their image. That's the exact opposite of what needs to happen. If you want to expand your market, you need to target market a little bit. And I think those 2 companies, Polar Latitudes and Ocean Wide, have at least dipped their toe in the water in terms of acceptance of staff. That said, I think it's a little different when you're out on ship than when you're talking to the executive level. So I think there can be a little bit of an issue with that, to Kyle's point around, well, we're not going to have a gay guide on a trip that has gays on it. Why wouldn't you do that? And so potentially, unless Kyle would have reached out, he would have not gotten that job. And that's kind of silly. And I think that's some internalized homophobia within the industry that people don't even know about, or there's a perception or fear that, my God, what are our guests going to think? Well, guess what? The people who go to Antarctica really want to go there. And probably the last thing they're worried about is the guide's sexuality, right? These people have traveled the world. They really want to go there. Most of them are a little older than, a Carnival cruise in the Caribbean. It's a booze cruise. So they don't care. And I think we worry about that more from a marketing perspective, industry-wide, than we should.
Carl, just on that, we had a question from Karen, which is very pertinent to Mark's last comment. How can the industry make the industry more welcoming for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans guests? I mean, because just reflecting on my background, I worked at Port LaCroix 2006-07, and we had a all-female lesbian cruise come in, and our base commander was very excited about that because he wanted to transform as many as he could. And when I said, well, what would you feel about an all-gay male group coming to Port LaCroix? And he said he wouldn't let them come. So, and he didn't at that time. I don't think he realized that I was gay, but anyway, he wasn't that bright. But Kyle, I mean, just tell me how you feel about that issue of welcoming more LGBT guests into the community of the polar industry.
Part of it, it's just like, it's not very often. This more happened with the women's rights movement. When the first woman was in space, suddenly all these girls started talking about they wanting to be astronauts instead of wanting to be princesses and stuff like that. Or more women scientists started becoming a lot more visible, and more women got into science. I think showing an example of just gay people in Antarctica might just be like, oh, well, a lot of people who are a lot of gay men who might be very into gay culture, seeing gay men out and about enjoying themselves on these voyages, they would suddenly see themselves in those people's boots. They go, oh, well, those other people are doing that. That seems like a fun place to go. I can go there. That's not on one of the watch lists where we should be careful of going to those places. Obviously, there's no inbuilt culture in Antarctica that anyone has to be worried about. So I think leading by example and not being afraid of that. If one of the staff members does, submit a photo of someone holding a gay pride flag, and that shows up on a company's social media feed, that would be fairly welcoming. The other aspect would also be perhaps sensitivity training for staff. A lot of staff, I've seen, I've only had one experience where I've been in other people's shoes where I felt I almost wanted to discriminate. Some people who would see two gay men holding hands down the street might be revolted, or two gay men kissing. They might see that as quite revolting. And I've had that experience with, I've seen two people who are very unattractive. They were being very physical, and for the first time ever, because I thought I'm like, everyone deserves love, blah, blah, blah. I still believe that, but I couldn't believe that there was this sort of carnal revulsion that I felt. And just knowing that, oh my God, that's how some people feel if they were to maybe see me. But I, being aware of those feelings, I cut them off, and I started to empathize with these people. And everyone deserves love. Everyone deserves to even express that love. And just being aware of how people feel and how I felt, being empathetic. That all these, if you're on a ship full of gay men, they're not here to be like a bunch of predators coming after you. Their unmanliness is not an affront to your manliness. Your self-worth has nothing to do with being manliness or who's around you. So I think sensitivity training in particular for guides could at least help guides start empathizing.
I think that's a really interesting point. I'll come to you in a minute, Mark. I had a comment from a female guide colleague last Antarctic season that there were guests that only I could deal with because they were one of my kind, and I just felt, well, yeah, I'll go and deal with that issue because I know what you're meaning, but I don't want to be, we can all deal with issues. We should all be as guides able to deal with all issues. I'm just going to quickly, Mark, nip to Hannah. Charlie Cunningham, Hannah, says hi and says he's had the pleasure of working for you on multiple occasions, and he's an openly gay deck officer, he says, and one of his biggest misconceptions was that the crew might react negatively. He's worked with numerous nationalities and never experienced homophobia, and had very supportive employers and captains. Mark, I know you were keen to come in, so Hannah, that's from Charlie. I'll come to you in a minute, but Mark, what were you wanting to comment on?
I just wanted to dovetail off what Kyle said quickly in terms of representation, right? What can companies do? What can guides do? My experience had been when I first started going, the gay community said to me, and I did a gay event, a large one. We raised a couple $1 million for a local AIDS charity, and people from all over the world came to Napa. But they said to me, why would you go to Antarctica? It's cold, but we, a community, we don't go there. Well, by my writing and constantly talking about it and messaging it, guess what? Now those same people are calling me saying, how did you get there? What company should I go with? Who do you work with? Because they seem like they're gay friendly. So I think just by messaging, just by having one picture on a website with two guys, they don't have to be making out or holding hands. There doesn't have to be big pink triangles all over the place. We're very perceptive as a community of an image, right? If there's an image of guys or women that are standing a little closer together than normal, we get that, we see it. And that would be huge for companies to do on their social media and their websites and in their marketing.
Hannah, coming to you now, just as an expedition leader, you've been a leader in the industry for a number of years. How do you mentor your junior guides, your new guides coming in? Do you feel that there's room for LGBTQ members in your team, and how do you give them confidence in developing themselves as guides within your team?
I just wouldn't. I've never really sort of picked out. It's like, when I'm mentoring guides, it's about how they're going to interact with the passengers and them just being inclusive, And when there was this discussion before about kind of, having separate groups and having different groups on, and if we have a particular group, we always discuss the needs of that group. So if we've got different nationalities, the nationality breakdown. I always think that that's actually possibly more interesting and important. And we've done full gay cruises only with gay women, and we've talked a little bit about kind of the expectations that people might have with that, but a lot of that was just around how much chocolate we were going to have on board the ship, because we were going to need a much bigger quantities of chocolate than normal. And it's kind of, I wouldn't, I've never felt the need to have it as a separate thing. It's, it's always just, we're there to support, do a great trip, give the passengers the best experience they can have, and look after each other, basically, and just kind of be there for each other. So I've always done it like that. It's not been as a separate thing, really.
And so, Kyle, I mean, in your experience, I mean, you're it looks like anyway you're much younger than the rest of us, because well, me and Mark have got huge beards, and Hannah's grey hair, and you look very young. As a younger member of the industry, how have you felt welcomed into it by expedition leaders, companies? Have you felt you had a place?
It's sort of like it's kind of like a person-to-person basis, you know. Generally, it's like 99% of the time, it's always really, really good or supportive. I find that I tend to get along a lot better with some of the female staff. That's always a very comfortable place to be. But like male staff, some of them are really good friends and very, very welcoming. Very, very few people are have the courage to, you know, I guess, object to me being gay or different to my face. But then you hear about it in the background too. So like people know that it's wrong to say, you know, that the person's gay or whatever, but they'll start talking about it in the background or between emails from each other. Like, I don't know, my EL one time sat me down and said, you know, just so you know, I'm batting for you because, you know, the office just sent me a letter saying, you know, we think your voice is too gay. You sound too gay. We're okay with you being gay as long as nobody knows you're being gay. And it's funny because a lot like Hannah, I don't get up on the microphone and say, hi, I'm your photography guide, I'm gay. I don't I don't ever do that. I only ever talk about it when people ask me about it or my relationships. So you always hear about it third person or from the grapevine that, you know, someone else was worried that I was too gay. And I don't even, it doesn't ever, it shouldn't come up like that because, you know, I'm talking about penguins, I'm talking about art, I'm talking about beauty, and I'm here to do the job and to talk to passengers and inspire them. So it is a little bit shocking when you start hearing this from different parties what's going on behind your back. But to my face, it's always very, for the most part, quite supportive.
Well, that's a very interesting. That poses another very interesting question. Do you feel as guides you have to man up? You have to be more, not masculine, but more, but be, you know, what the guests would imagine a polar expedition leader to be? Because, you know, we know that with the history of polar guides and expedition leaders, we've had all sorts of types out there, from Admiral Byrd to Scott to Shackleton. Not that we're, I think any of us, I apologize, in that league, but we are people that our guests look up to. You know, our expedition crew, bridge officers and staff know us day to day, but we only see the guests for a very short time. We see them for a week or 2, 3 weeks, maybe. Do we act up? Do you feel like you have to act up for their behalf? Hannah?
I've often wished I could have a beard like you, actually. I think a beard would...
You can borrow it.
Yeah.
I'll send you one.
I'd love to have a polar beard. I mean, I think just generally as it's not exactly acting it, but I think generally you have, you know, I have my expedition kind of hat which I put on when I go to sea, and when I'm at home I have a different, you know, hat, and when I'm with my friends, you know, I think that just generally it's not exactly acting, you know. I think that you're modifying your behavior anyway for just being out there, being, you know, in front of guests. So I don't know that it's, yeah, I mean, I think for most people, I think, you know, I think a lot of guests probably know or think that possibly I'm gay, but I don't think it's ever been a real issue for them either, if they think about it at all. As I say, I think a lot of the time, just, you know, my short stature and my roundness is the thing that they first notice. and probably think, oh, okay, what she isn't the expedition leader who's tall with the big beard. She kind of looks. But it's after a bit they get to know that I kind of know where I'm going and get to show them good things. So but it's sort of like with everything, it's gaining trust of people, and gaining trust, confidence of the passengers, and projecting confidence really, rather than anything about sexuality. Because I think that actually for most people, like we've been saying, it's not that it shouldn't be that important. And I feel sorry that it's been made important, for Kyle and for Mark, whereas for me it's not been that important. It's not,
I think that you've made some incredibly good points, and I think it comes down to the delivery of the product, doesn't it? Whether you're baking a cake or whether you're getting someone safe from ship to shore, whether you're doing your polar bear scouting, whether you're giving an interpretation, that's really the most important thing about what we do as guides. One point we've had asked is, just moving on a little bit, given that we've just got less than 10 minutes to go, is we're living in a world where inclusivity has been pushed up the agenda a little bit, with the background of Black Lives Matter, global diversity. Do you think that the PTGA is doing enough? Are we, is our guide association doing enough to support inclusivity? Can they do more? Because let's face it, we're four white people talking about this, and I don't personally work with any Black guides. Can we do more to reach out to a more inclusive audience of colleagues? Mark, maybe you could start us off.
Yeah, to your point, I don't think I've worked with any guides of color. A few Latin guides and a few Chinese, but I think there's always opportunity to reach out. Yes. I think on a societal level, it takes time for marginalized communities, like we've talked about with the gay community, being welcomed in an industry like this. So we need to start showing that imagery. And yes, I think we can. Maybe we put a Black guide on the website or on social media, or we start having those conversations. I think it's possible. Can we do better? Sure, we can always do better. But I think just by nature of having this conversation that we're having, and having it brought up about, well, why aren't we having a discussion around women, or why aren't we having a discussion around people of color, is the right direction. So I think PTGA is starting to bring those conversations up, and it's important.
Kyle, how about you? How do you feel about this?
I think if PTGA does want to get involved in creating more diversity and inclusivity, I think PTGA could actually have a good roadmap of becoming a guide. I mean, we're talking to people who are already guides, and talking about getting people who weren't guides to come in and do this type of job. One of the most common things I'm asked is what do I do to be a guide? And often a lot of people say, well, it's who I knew. I had the right connections, and then I started doing the job, and then I got in. But if PTGA had a way of at least onboarding people who haven't become a guide yet, but also show that for these minorities that you can become a guide. This is how. That would be fantastic and pretty cool, actually.
Hannah, do you think that the industry still has quite a roughneck attitude amongst guides? We work hard, we play hard, we drink, we whatever. Because I think we've all had the experience of some teams like that. Is that okay? Is that appropriate? Or should we all, be more passive and a little bit more gentle in our approach to ourselves?
I think there's room for everything, but I think that it is changing a bit. I think also, most of the companies I work for now have got quite, good alcohol policies that mean that we don't drink and drive. Back in the day, I think we all know about driving Zodiacs under the, that there was times when, some people shouldn't have probably been in charge of a vehicle with an engine on it, out in the open ocean. But and I think it has changed a lot. And but I think there's still, as I say, I still get it. It happens rarer, but I have male colleagues who've maybe been in the industry 3 or 4 years who'll start to explain to me about how to do something, and I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this for a while. It's okay. I kind of, and I've had, incidents with captains and pilots. And, a few years ago, I was trying to doing a landing up in Svalbard, and we'd spotted a polar bear, and I asked the captain if we could just drop the boats, and just do a Zodiac cruise. And we were heading for somewhere, and I just said, I think we could just do a cruise here because there was a bear up on the hillside. And there was a little walrus colony that we just passed, and it wasn't one that was, and so we, and then the pilot who was on board was sort of giving me all these instructions, and I was just like, yeah, I need to go and get my Zodiac now. And he's like, yes, but you are going to take this into account. And I'm like, yeah, this is like my 15th season of working in Svalbard. And I was thinking, if I was a 50-year-old male expedition leader who'd spent 15 years doing trips, he would not have been having that conversation with me. There's absolutely no question that he would have been. And I just, things like that happen. And it's sort of, it's trying to kind of get that kind of,
No, sorry, go ahead.
I just think that, I think that as more and more, younger people and younger women and with, who come in who have, a very, very well trained guides. It's sort of, and I think just generally that, it has changed quite a lot already, and the numbers of, more and more women are coming into the industry, and different nationalities a little bit as well, which is great, down in Antarctica. And it's, I think that the more people who come in, it will change.
So the greater diversity is the way forward. I think it's fascinating to hear your account of that experience with, your pilot saying, questioning your abilities, because I work with a number of women expedition leaders, notably Susan Adey, of course. Hi, Susan, if you're there. Think, well, I don't personally think twice about who's leading me, as long as they're leading me well. And that doesn't matter what color, race, size, shape, age they are. If I've got faith in them, and maybe as guides, as a population of guides, we just need to have more faith, to share more faith. We've got one final question, just I'm laughing honestly because I know who this is from Kevin. Hi, Kevin Morgan. Kevin was last week's presenter. Cruise ships are inclusive and many guests are open about their sexuality. As staff, should we respond to attitudes from other guests who are negative about other guests because of their sexual nature? And I think we've only got like 30 seconds to go. So yeah, we should, just as I personally feel, disagree with me if you like, that if we witness homophobia or racism or sexism within the population of guests we have on board, we should quietly deal with that. We don't have to embarrass people, but go on, Mark.
Yeah, we just have a few minutes. I just wanted to sort of follow up, just saying from my experience, and likewise, as Kyle mentioned, overall, coming into the industry has been much more welcoming than I expected.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, I really completely went into the closet my first season. And so I have made amazing friends, straight friends from all nationalities who've gotten to know me, and we're still very close. There's, 1% of the time that things happen, but for the most part, I've felt just really a sense of and I've met great people.
Thank you, Mark. I'd just like to finish off by saying thank you very much again to Hannah, to Kyle, to Mark, and also to PTGA for letting us have this discussion. Thank you to all of our audience. Appreciate you tuning in and the questions we've had. Next week, we have the delightful Pamela Neroy talking about the driver's guide to understanding surf. And I'll certainly be tuning into that. It's a very important issue for all of us that work in Svalbard and South Georgia particularly. So without that, I'll wish you all a safe lunchtime, evening, breakfast, whatever you are around the world. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you.
And thanks for the panel.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.